I'm Maya.
And I'm Sid.
And you're listening to the Real Life Podcast. We're an interactive show which tackles everything life sciences from conservation biology to zoology and botany.
Our podcast is where environmental awareness meets fun and chatter.
So come and listen to us as real life scientists tackle real life topics. Let's go. Our guest today is a born and raised Jamaican scientist.
She has her bachelor's and her PhD in molecular biology from the University of the West Indies, Mona.
She is the founder and the director of the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council.
And even though she's known for her volunteerism, she's a blogger, she's a writer, she's a social media coordinator, and just so much more.
So let us welcome this extremely multifaceted young woman.
Good morning, ladies. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Ms Terrelonge. It's so nice to meet you.
Just a clarification, I don't have my PhD yet, but I like how you're speaking it into being. I'm in the process.
Okay, that's great. That's motivation. I love that. So today we just want to have a small conversation with you. Nothing long, nothing serious.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, of course. We just want our readers to get to know you, and the point of this podcast in general is just to try and bring awareness of different areas in Jamaica, especially in science and especially in the life sciences, where we realize that there might not be a platform to talk about this as yet. So we're like, yes, let's make the platform.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
Definitely. So we want to start off with some light-hearted warm-up questions. We call this real. So, what is your guilty pleasure?
Well, I really like food, so I like most food things. So this is hard to pick one. I think my guilty pleasure food is always gonna be like a macaroni and cheese, some kind of pasta with whole heap of cheese in it. That's my thing.
Yes. A woman after my own heart.
No, that's facts. Because for me, I will go to a restaurant and order pasta, and it's not cheesy.
Yeah,
I need
cheese on everything.
Yes,
cheese on everything. Right. So, Ms Terrelonge, I noticed on your LinkedIn that you said you're a mental health advocate, and I know, especially with this whole pandemic going on, a lot of people are now becoming very aware of how their mental health affects them. But why do you think we should take this seriously as young people?
All right. Well, I think that many of us as young people are struggling with mental health challenges. And I don't want to say it's more than the previous generation, but I think our generation, in terms of millennials and Gen Zs, we grew up exposed to a lot more. It's a very different world with the internet and all of the information at our fingertips as compared to our parents or grandparents. So in terms of how we approach our mental health and some of the triggers that might affect us, you might see them coming up more among young people. I think it's important to have the conversation because we do have a stigma when we hear people with mental illness. We think of the people them on the road begging money.
We always think crazy.
But I think I want to use my life as an example. So I have bipolar 2 disorder. And that's why I kind of started my advocacy. But I do it to say that, you can be quote unquote crazy. You can have a mental illness and still lead a happy, productive life. It's just that you need to take the steps to ensure that you are able to have that life. My mental health advocacy, even though I'm not really as much in the mental health space anymore, but my advocacy is really focused towards providing more access to mental health services. So I know that there are a lot of campaigns in terms of talking about mental health, reducing the stigma, and all of those things are important. But I think for me, my passion lies a little bit more in terms of getting people access to whether it's therapy that they can afford, whether it's medication that they can afford, because I know that the affordability of getting help is one of the biggest barriers in Jamaica.
Sure, yeah. Love that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that so much. Because, you mentioned the thing about how so many things are thrown at us. And I remember, we're still in a pandemic, or however you want to phrase it. We're still in a pandemic, and at the start of the pandemic, we had a lot of things where it was on social media, and there were these heavy topics, like people talking about their abuse stories, people talking about, the Black Lives Matter movement in Jamaica and abroad, and all of these things. And I was saying to my friends one day, it's crazy to be in a world where one day you can be scrolling through social media and first post is a funny quote, and then the next post is talking about this issue happening in Africa where millions of people are dying, and the next post is an inspirational post, and then the next post you get me another post about
social
people who are dying, and it's just like
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you're in a roller coaster of emotions, and I don't think humans were ever designed to take in that much information at one sitting, to go from this high to that low, to this high to that low. That's really damaging. And I also like how you made the distinction between, people taking care of their mental health and then also persons with mental illnesses, because I think that one thing that we do all the time is we're like, okay, awareness, and then it's like, okay, I'm aware of it now, what do I do now? And persons who need the help the most are the persons who can't afford it, or who don't even feel like they have an issue because they grew up hearing that this is just life. Oh, we're the real life podcast and we're talking about life. They're just like, oh, life is hard, hardships come your way, this is just something that's normal, and then nobody really told you that, hey, anxiety doesn't just look like that. You may have high functioning anxiety, you may have high functioning depression, you may be depressed and still walking around doing stuff and getting things done. So I definitely think that's really admirable for you to be advocating for people to not just have a space to talk about their issues, but to realistically get help and access.
Thank you.
That's so important.
Love that.
Yeah. So, but we see that you're an advocate for climate change and sustainability and mental health. But if you had to choose any other topic in Jamaica to be an advocate for,
wow, there's so many things wrong with Jamaica. I could pick anything.
So many things. Oh my.
I think in terms of my personal passion, it's always going to come back to something in science and research. Before I got into the advocacy space per se, I had always said that, I want science in Jamaica to kind of take on a new look. So I always used to say, if I have kids and they want to do sciences in school, I don't want to tell them what I was told, that why you're not gonna get a job if you don't know medicine, why are you doing this degree, where are you going to work. I don't want to have those conversations with my kids. So I think that if I were to, maybe one day I will end up in that kind of space, just in terms of reframe how we think of science careers specifically, because you get pigeonholed into you're doing science subjects, so you must be trying to get into med, or you end up in pure and applied if you don't get into med, or you end up they're very narrow.
So strange, because I had that on there for you.
Look at that.
I had that on there for you. I was like, especially when we talk about life sciences, like immediately, a lot of people don't even know about the life sciences department at UAE.
Yeah, we don't even know that.
Immediately they hear science or even life sciences, especially for me, because I'm doing animal bio. We're both doing an animal bio degree. And I tell people, oh, I'm studying animal biology. They go, oh, so I'll be vet. And I'm like,
oh, you're becoming a vet.
There are so many other things I could do with this degree, but people aren't aware of it. And I guess that's really why we're here to do this podcast. So I'm really glad you went there.
Yeah, because even when I applied for molecular biology, I know what I wanted to do. It was molecular biology, and people were always asking, so you're going to the med? And I was like, no, I don't want to do med. I'm not interested in doing med. This is what I want to do.
I don't want to be a doctor.
Right. So, yeah.
And then it also that a doctor of philosophy is different from, medical doctors. So they're like, oh, I could still become Dr. Maya Buchanan Smith. You can still be a doctor. You're getting your PhD.
Right.
So, we're claiming it. You will be Dr. Terrelonge soon, but they're not going to recognize
not going to be cutting
that you're
people
a doctor.
And writing prescriptions.
Yeah, I don't need to see people.
So, all right. So, now... Oh yeah, you already touched on how you got into this field, so we don't even need to go back there because I really love that. But we want to know, how did the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council start? Like, how did you get the passion to do that? Like, what drove that?
Well, I kind of fell into it by accident. That's the honest answer. But
wow, just bucket to one.
That's how life go these days. So in 2015, let's go back a little bit. 2015, I was on the guild as postgraduate rep, and one of the persons that I worked closely with was Professor Dale Weber. At the time, he was head of grad studies. He is now he's still principal, right? He's now principal at UWI. And we had a kind of working relationship. So at the end of 2016, after my tenure on the guild was over and everything, I was reading the newspaper and I saw that he was appointed head of the Jamaica Climate Change Advisory Board. And that would have happened after our 2016 election. And they had appointed, so that's when this government would have just taken power the first time, and they appointed a new Climate Change Advisory Board. So based on my relationship with him, I enjoyed working with him. So I kind of just reached out and said, hey, is there any space for young people to become involved? Is there any way I can volunteer, anything like that? I wasn't intending to go for a leadership position or anything like that. I kind of just wanted to wet my feet. And he said that the advisory board is looking to start a youth council, so I should go out and start a youth council. So that's what I did. We posted I contacted another friend of mine who was an environmentalist, and we posted it on Twitter and Facebook, just in terms of to find out if people would be interested, because it don't make sense to start a council and then nobody's interested. So I kind of wanted to gauge the interest of young people. We got 88 responses on the first night. So I was like, okay, clearly young people are interested, let me not, once you engage them, you have to keep them engaged. So that's how the Climate Change Council was born. We got ourselves together, we put together our executive team, we kind of started to organize, and that was 2017, so 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. And that's where we started.
Wow, that's amazing. I wish opportunities would just knock on my door like that. But I'm glad that you did that. So then, what was the thing that made you say that, okay, climate change is an issue that's worth tackling?
Well, when I started in the climate change space, I kind of approached it more from my science background. So I was very concerned about protecting biodiversity, protecting natural resources, that sort of thing. But the more that I got involved in the climate change field is the more I started to recognize the impact on people. And I think that's kind of where my interest turned into more passion or purpose, because it's not that protecting the trees and the birds isn't important, but for us in Jamaica, climate change is more than that. It's a bread and butter issue. It's a life and death issue, and it affects a lot of people. How they're going to send their kids to school, how are they going to become economically dependent. And I think when I kind of started to make all of these connections and learn more and more, for me, we have to do something. This is a space that people have to be in, because it underpins so many things about how Jamaica can actually develop going forward. And I keep talking about these future kids that I'm going to have one day or not, but it's the same principle. I want my kids to grow up in a more sustainable Jamaica. I don't want them to be having the same conversations that we are having now. So I think it's kind of creating a livable future for our generation and the generations to come.
This question isn't scheduled, but I remember just recently I was walking with my mother and she did something, and I remember my immediate thought, someone was burning a fire pit, and she threw something on it, and I was just like, Mommy, what are you doing? And she's just like, it's a fire heap. And I said, but Mommy, you're encouraging them to burn another fire. And she's just like, but it's already there. And I'm like, Mommy, but I'm hoping for the day when their generation will see the impact that they have on the environment. Do you think that will ever actually happen?
Trust me.
Is it just that only young people can change this, or do you think we can teach people that their actions have impact?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the mother example, because I have also been fighting with my mother. My mother loves a plastic bag, so anything she gives me, she'll wrap it in 3-4 plastic bags. She love her plastic bag. She love her water bucket them, and it's been a process. But I went home for Christmas and she said something to me that she's trying to become a plastic-free household. And I was so shook. I was just like, yes, finally. Right? So I do think that, and I think that's why it's so important for us as young people to really drive the message, because we have the ability to connect with people older than us and people younger than us. And I think that that's why it's so important for our generation to kind of take charge. I think that it is true that a lot of older Jamaicans are set in their ways, and you're not going to convert everybody. You're not going to get everybody to change their behavior. But I think if we get enough of the society to recognize what they're doing, and not just what they're doing, but recognize the impact of what they're doing and how it's going to affect them and the people around them, I think you start to kind of see some sort of change.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I get that completely. And then even myself, I was trying to figure out how I could go like zero waste. And it can be hard sometimes in a country like Jamaica where, you know, sometimes when you go to the States, some places recycling is compulsory, right? Or you get charged a fine. But here, it's not even like, I honestly don't know who puts the recycling bins. I don't know who cleans them up, if I'm being honest with you guys. Or even like things like, I'm like trying to reduce how much plastic I use, but then it's kind of expensive sometimes to get alternatives like wood, or even wood is causing deforestation, but like even to get alternatives can sometimes be hard, you know? So I just feel like, but at the same time, I was having a conversation with my family, and I was saying, you know, when the plastic ban on plastic straws came in Jamaica, all of a sudden bamboo straws on the rave. Everybody making bamboo straw business. When they say no more plastic bags, all of a sudden reusable bags are being sold on the roadside. Right. When COVID comes, all of a sudden everybody is selling masks. So I'm like, if it's a case where we've outlawed these things, all of a sudden it's going to be a trend, and it's going to be less expensive for us to maintain this kind of lifestyle, because more people are going to make an effort. You know, when there's a demand, the supplier is going to try and fill that demand by making the things necessary. So if we say, hey, we're going to stop using single-use plastic bottles, and we're going to start doing this thing where you can refill your bottles and having refillable water station, that opens up a niche for people to start making money and making a business out of that. And then now we have a case where we're being sustainable and we're also advancing economically.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that we can, you know, better changes, and we can definitely make a change where it's you know, benefiting both parties. It's benefiting the government, it's benefiting us, and it's benefiting all the consumers.
Yeah, that's the dream.
Yeah, definitely. So right now, I think sometimes, you know, listeners who are listening to this is a podcast for everybody. So some people here may not necessarily be scientifically inclined, but those who are scientifically inclined, we welcome you as well. So what are the environmental impacts that we can actually see right now of climate change?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you guys live in Kingston, but it is so infernally hot, and we can see how the temperature has increased over time. Even I'm from Mandeville, so I'm used to cold breeze.
I want to move.
But even going back to Mandeville now is not the same cold Mandeville as when I was in high school. It's still colder than Kingston, but it's definitely not the same.
Maybe true, me never used to it, but every time I go to Mandeville, me I freeze.
Right,
definitely. I'm like, where?
So I think that is when we talk about things that we can see and feel off the bat. It's definitely a lot hotter than it was 10 years ago, and we're not going back to the 10 years ago. This is the new reality. We see where we have, for example, last October we had some really, really heavy rains for 2 weeks that caused a whole bunch of things, landslides, one person lost their life. So those very heavy rainfall events, we see more of. We're used to having like May rains and October rains in Jamaica. That's our regular rainy season, but we're not used to the sheer amount of water that is coming with the rainy seasons. It's a lot more than in previous years. We also see sea level rise. I don't know if you've been to Port Royal over the past couple of years. Sometimes if you go to Port Royal, you'll see what they call dry weather flooding. So there's no rain, you just see some water come up on the road sometimes, and you're not sure where it comes from. And that happens in other cities. It happens a lot in cities in Florida as well. And that's because of
Oh yes, as I would have
Right. So if you go to Port Royal, sometimes you will see it as well. And that's because of sea level rise. And when we think about how Jamaica is set up, for example, if you think about downtown Kingston, that's where Parliament is, that's where the bank HQs are, that is where all of the big pretty buildings are.
And it's right on the water.
Right. So can you just imagine one day all of that flood out? What kind of loss that would be for Jamaica?
Economy,
right.
Right.
So sea level rise is something that we have to think about. What other effects? Caribbean specifically, well, I spoke about the rains getting heavier. We also see a lot more intense storms. I think we in Jamaica have been lucky to be dodging all of these big storms over the past couple of years, but we're not out of the danger zone. And the fact that we keep like, for example, there are so many Category 5 hurricanes last season. We see them forming very rapidly. So those are some of the changes that we can see off the bat.
I don't know if you're also aware, because I love that you segued into this, because I was thinking about the other day on the news. I don't know if you saw it. It was international news though, but in Madrid, they had snow for the first time in 61 years. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, how do people say that climate change isn't real?
The change isn't real. That's that.
Like, when you can look at a person, and I mean, I haven't been alive that long. I've just been here 23 years. Maya even younger. And I'm saying the rains that I'm seeing these days are like so terrible in my little Jamaica here.
Yeah.
Like, what do you tell people
like,
that want to say that this issue isn't a real thing? Like, what more we say to them? Like, oh, what more we can show you? I don't know. People are saying this is just life.
The climate has always been changing. I've heard that so many times. Personally, I tell people I'm not on a conversion mission. That's not what I do. So I'm not going to argue the reality. I don't think that in Jamaica we have the luxury to be arguing if it's real or not. So personally, I don't engage people like that, but a lot of people do. And it's important to engage them. Me just not take up that distress there. But yeah, as I said, I don't think in Jamaica we have time to be arguing, is it real or is it not? I think that's a first world luxury, because for us it's real, it's here, it's been here, it's not a future thing. And as I said, for us it's a bread and butter, life and death issue.
Definitely. Especially because like for the quote unquote first world countries, they contribute the most to climate change. But for us, we feel it the most. So we probably contribute less than they do. But because we're an island, and like you mentioned, the water levels rising. And the other day, we saw this documentary about mangroves in Jamaica and how we have none. Well, not none, but we don't have as many. So we don't have as much protection on our shoreline and all of that stuff. So definitely, I mean, if it can rain in Jamaica for 1 week and all of the roads wash away and landslide this and that, then I don't know what can happen if, we have an actual hurricane, because God has spared us so many times. I just wonder, if we have a hurricane, is it going to be a Gilbert? Is it going to be a Sandy? Or is it going to be a combination of both? And how will we survive that, especially given that we are in a pandemic right now? I mean, the pandemic, quote unquote, might be over soon, but just the economic
panorama, that's here to stay.
The economic impacts that we've already had from the pandemic, and then add a natural disaster to that. Wow. So what advice would you give to persons who are still UA students or still university students who, I mean, I've been in university for 3 years, and things like this are things that you have to go out on your own and learn about, not necessarily something that you would learn from your lecturers. So what advice would you give to them, or to persons who want to be advocates for things like this? What advice would you give to them?
Well, yeah, you do have to go out and find your information. I think there are a lot of resources. So if you're at UA, you have people like Prof. Michael Taylor in the Department of Physics. You have a lot of the preeminent researchers in the Caribbean. You don't know Prof. Taylor? He's the Dean of SciTech now. Yes. So preeminent climate researcher, not just in the Caribbean, but across the world. A lot of the Caribbean climate research is centered at UWI. So there are a lot of very knowledgeable persons you can talk to. Prof. Anthony Clayton is another one. Dr. David Smith is another one. So in terms of getting perspective, then you can also reach out to organizations. So, for example, organizations like the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council, you can join. They're also, but you don't have to. Plug. But, if you don't want to join us, fine, there are many other organizations. I know UWI has an arm that they do climate change mitigation through. If you're interested in the agriculture, because climate change is so multifaceted, you can always find a line of advocacy that aligns to something you're already passionate about. So if you're interested in the agriculture side of it, 4-H has a lot of programs. You can liaise with RADA, Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. They're very open, especially with Minister Floyd Green now. Very open to innovation and having those sorts of conversations. There are also a lot of free courses online if you're just looking to kind of get some more knowledge, whether it's climate science, whether it is particular effects. There's a whole bunch of free courses online that are really easy. You can do them in your free time, just in terms of building up your knowledge. My advice would be to join an existing group. You do have the opportunity to form your own group if you don't see somebody addressing what you think really needs to be addressed. If you see a gap, then you're free to form your own group. But I do say join an existing group because there are quite a few youth environmental groups in Jamaica now. And I think that we would all be better served working together.
Instead of everybody doing their own little thing.
Right. And then when you have different organizations might have a slightly different mandate or objective than another one, then you can always tailor your activities to, you're achieving the same goal, but you can tailor the activities to what the group is already doing. So yes, my advice to young people is to find a group, join it, and it doesn't even have to be an environmental group. So for example, you might be part of a Rotaract group. That's not an environmental group per se, but you can go to your Rotaract meeting and say, hey, I think we should do something in climate change or environmental, or I want to do a tree planting project, whatever it is, and use that organization to be able to push the kind of advocacy that you want.
Love that. Definitely. So I have one big question for you, and I don't know if we should even tackle that, but we're going to. So the bauxite industry, it's a big money maker for Jamaica. But their main thing is mining, which is like basically mashing up the place. So what was it? Wait. It's how do you think it affects climate change, and should we or should we not stop bauxite mining?
All right, so let me give my disclaimer at first. I know that bauxite is a big economic driver for Jamaica. Both of my parents worked at a bauxite company, so really is bauxite money send me go school. That being said, I don't need to write the sins of my parents. I think in terms of bauxite mining, the biggest mining, first of all, the mining process is when you're removing topsoil. And anytime you're removing topsoil, you are messing with the biodiversity, whether it is the flora, which is the plants, or the fauna, which is the animals in the area. Also, when you remove the topsoil, you are increasing flooding risk, because a lot of that topsoil is what, especially when you cut down trees in a big area, right, you're soaking up the water. That's the mining process. The processing of alumina itself, which is not all companies do that, but some of the companies do that, is where you have most of the economic concerns, because that's where you have like the mud lake with the caustic soda. That's where you have things like, for example, in Yuatan, where you might hear about river spills. So some of that waste is spilling into the river and contaminating the water. Those considerations. I think in terms of deciding whether or not to mine, it's easy to take the position as an environmentalist to be like, no mining. But I think in order to back up that position, we need to move into quantifying our natural resources. That's something that other countries do that we don't do. So it's putting a dollar value to all the trees that you move. It's putting a dollar value to the changes in water quality. And when you do that, you can actually do an analysis to say, okay, this is how much money we're going to bring in from bauxite, but this is how much money we're going to lose in terms of environmental impacts. And I feel like it's only when you have those two things in front of you, you can make a decision and say, you know what, the benefits, because it might be that after we do that quantification, the benefits of bauxite still outweigh the environmental degradation. I don't think so personally, but let's just say that is the case. Yeah.
Personally, but and
if that is the case, and the government comes out and say, look, we've assessed both sides, but it really is that, but the benefits outweigh the cons, then they have an argument. But I think for us, especially because we don't have that kind of quantification to back us up, people are always quick to say, you just tree huggers, you don't care about development, you just correct. So I think that's something that we really need to move into doing a lot more in Jamaica, and not just for mining, because I think if we get into kind of doing that, then a lot of the decisions across the board, so even we talked about bauxite, but there's also the limestone mining lease in Dry Harbor Mountains. That was a big thing last year. Even those conversations, if we can say, okay, this is the cost of going forward, and this is the cost of, or this is the amount of money it might generate, then you can actually do a really good comparison and be able to have those arguments.
And transparency is such a big issue.
Definitely.
Transparency.
If we looked at the internal assessment too for the cockpit country the other day. I mean, I know you, Eleanor, you were at the cultural town hall for that. And we saw where one of our lecturers, Dr. Eric Garaway, he weighed in about what they were saying about the popular humorous butterfly. He was like, hey, none of what you did made any sense. And I'm just saying, if we're going to be paying to do an assessment of this area to actually assess the environmental impacts that are going to happen, and then you skew it to make the information seem like, to an average person, it's going to sound, oh, this is fine. But to persons who are scientists and who understand, the basis of what you're saying, they're going to say, absolutely not. This is not done properly. And I just think that there should be some kind of review system or something in place to actually properly assess what we're doing. Because saying that you're going to give people jobs is not a justification if all of the jobs they're going to get is going to make them sick in the next 5 years. And then that's going to make them have to go to the doctor. And then, they may have complications. So that's not a proper justification then for you doing this. And then sometimes the effects of mining can be irreversible. And we're a land of wood and water. And when we have no more wood and we have no more water, what are we going to be after?
Retweet. Can we just put that on our shirt? Well, Ms. Terrelonge, this has been a great
done already? Okay. All right.
I mean, well, is there anything that you wanted to say that we didn't add?
Sorry, repeat that.
Is there anything else that you wanted to highlight that we didn't really mention in terms of climate change and environmental issues?
I don't think so. I just wanted to add, maybe to give some context coming from the mining conversation. And I think it's something that lots of people might not know. One of the problems with our environmental review process is that it is on the developer to do the environmental impact assessment. So it's not the government that does it, it is the person that wants the mining lease. So if Miranda comes to me and pays me and tells me, hey, you need to do an EIA, and we want to get this permit, then you can kind of follow where that's gonna go, because if Miranda is paying me, I am gonna want to make it look good enough so that the people paying me can get their permit.
They have no interest in giving an honest review. They just...
I would have seen that, so you would have brought up the town hall, and you would have seen the scientific part of the report was so lacking that you and I, as I don't know exactly what field you're in, but you and I as just general science people that have done biology courses could look at it and say, wait a minute, this doesn't make no sense. And because there's no step in there to kind of validate it. So NEPA doesn't have they do a review of the EIA, but they don't really have the resources to go back out and check and see, if what the people say is true and that sort of thing. So because of how the process is currently, that's why we keep having so many of these conversations. So I think what we need to do is look at kind of reshaping the process itself so we can stop having these individual arguments over these individual leases. So I just wanted to add that to give some context, because I know that's something that not a lot of people know in terms of how the process works and where the government stands in it. And I think it's important that we kind of understand it in the context going forward.
And hopefully with this podcast, we can actually provide a platform so that, maybe one day they can even come on and help others to understand the things that we're trying to say.
Definitely. And I mean, if we're going to talk about, if we make the decision and say, all right, bauxite mining, let's not do that, right? What things can we do then in place of the bauxite mining that is going to still be sustainable and that will have a better impact? If we're going to say no more bauxite mining, what would we do? What would be a, fair kind of replacement for that kind of economic?
Well, that would be on the government to see where they could find something.
I think that
in the economy.
I think that Jamaica has a lot of potential for green technology development. We have the sun for solar energy. We have the wind for wind energy. And I think that that's an area that the government could really look, because there are a lot of jobs that can be created. It would just, you do have to retrain a section of your workforce, but you're also giving people skills. So I think that, we're definitely behind the 8 ball. I'm a little frustrated with, how Jamaicans are such an innovative people, but then when it comes to things like this, we don't think outside the box. So I'd love to see us move in that kind of direction. So we couple our sustainable development goals, also generating income for our economy.
Definitely. I also think ecotourism is something that we could do as well. Ecotourism is something we could definitely explore, because if you keep having to chop down our natural resources to build up beaches, chop down our natural resources, to have hotels being erected or areas for tourists being erected. I mean, when tourists come to Jamaica, they tweet that they're in the jungle and they expect the jungle. So we keep on the jungle and pay them proper, like have them pay to see the jungle. That will help boost us. It will boost our tourism section, and it will also be sustainable as well.
Yeah,
definitely. So we've come to the end of our podcast. We've been talking for 40 minutes. Thank you so much, Ms Terrelonge, for coming and talking to us this morning. So how can our listeners connect with you, and how can they connect with the Jamaica Climate
Change? You can follow the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council at Our Footprint JA. So that is OurFootprintJA. We're on Instagram, on Twitter. There's an underscore after the Our Footprint JA. But if you search Our Footprint JA, you'll find us on Facebook. You can also go to our website. If you want to join, there's a sign up link on our website. So you can just sign up there and you'll be automatically added to our mailing list. In terms of connecting with me, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Jamaican Lab Rat. I talk about science stuff sometimes, so you can follow me there. That's it.
And her Twitter is hilarious, by the way,
guys. You should get on there.
But thank you so much for coming, and I guess that is it for today. Bye.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Real Life Podcast. Follow us on our social media pages, Real Life Pod 876 on Twitter and the Real Life Podcast 876 on Instagram and Facebook. Remember, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Tune in next week, where real life scientists tackle real life issues.